of asking, follow the money, how's the money being spent? And she's definitely another wise Latina, because I personally have seen her in meetings where she's constantly always asking those questions, so I want to thank you for that. My question for the entire panel is, from the Bell experience, I actually want to thank City of Bell for that experience, because if it had not been for the Bell experience, other cities would not have been exposed or been under scrutiny by their own fellow community. And so moving forward, I will tell you, I'm born and raised in the city of Riverside. I'm a candidate for city council there now. And I learned we use the same city attorney firm, Best and Krieger, and we use the same auditing firm. And so it was very interesting to me, again, follow the money, see where the mutual contractors are. Thank you very much, Supervisor, for bringing that up. Because having lived in Montebello for a couple years, I also saw the conflict of interests in many of our cities. And so moving forward, where do you see accountability changing in city governments and the municipalities, and where do you see the impact to those predators?
You know, and that's interesting, because there's people that think that there should have been somebody who should have seen some of this besides, and there's no doubt that in the pension, in the PERS program, some of those things should have been noticed as how they were rigging some of the compensation and the pension compensation. But for the most part, it really does begin by looking at that commonality, because those predators, that's their business. That's what they do. And I know I'm very familiar now with a good many of those folks, and I stay away from them, and I'm critical of them from time to time. And I also engage many of the council people to watch out for them, because they are the ones that are sitting around waiting in the wings for opportunities to take advantage of some of these cities and these city councils. It's happening across the board. But it is really sloppy on many of our parts, and I would say even the press as well. I mean, very frankly, I mean, this was spoon-fed to the LA Times, with all due respect. I mean, I wish they would have done some investigative reporting, but it was the police officers who were angry because there was going to be some movement to maybe change or at least bring down some of the salaries of some of the police officers. Their union got angry, so they went to the LA Times. That led to the expose. But for the most part, there isn't enough of us that are doing the kind of questioning as to across the board. We don't have enough kind of good government, civic organizations that are involved in bringing these things out. And even in those organizations, like if you take the Women League of Voters, when they have forums about how to get engaged, about what the Fair Political Practices is about, Commission is about, when they talk about getting involved in their community, and when they have community forums, you have a handful of people that show up. They don't participate. So there are many, many mechanisms to do that, but for the most part, it is really about the kind of accountability that just a couple of residents, by asking questions, engaging other people, can really bring out some of these very, very corrupt kinds of mechanisms. But it does take an awful lot of persistence. That's the case. It's not going to happen automatically. And the first thing you know, that you are going to be intimidated once you start really pulling away at some of the corruption. And so you have to be bold enough to be able to stand up to it as well. But it's very tough.
I'm going to have one more answer to that question and then go to the next question. I'm going to touch the bases as far as the persistence. I think that's very important. We need to stay on top of it, regardless of what the special interest groups are throwing at us. I know this is the first time I can actually say, I mean, literally, I'm being harassed by the cops simply because I'm standing up for my community. I'm standing up against, I mean, I refer to them as the big dogs because they're the ones that are injecting a lot of money into the campaign and not taking into consideration the effects that these decisions are going to have on the community. You know, and again, I think it's about courage and the love for the community, where if they're harassing you, if they're intimidating you, but if you love something, you're going to fight for it. And that's where courage comes from. When you love something, you fight for it.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ana Mascareñas. I first want to thank all the panelists for being inspiring and really sharing your messages and your story and your knowledge with us today. Thank you, Supervisor Molina, for being such a trailblazer for Chicana Latinas for many years. Nora, for your courage, and Alma as well. I'm glad to see you. I am privileged to work as a full-time health advocate for a nonprofit, an advocacy nonprofit. And we look at community-level pollutants and exposures, link them to health outcomes, fight for cleaner air, water, food, and housing. And so I definitely have some experience in fighting against what some of those special interests that have been referenced on the panel are, and making sure that community health is put up front. I'm also a resident in unincorporated East Los Angeles. I live in City Terrace and have been a leader for the past 3 years in the Cityhood for East Los Angeles movement. So we are currently now waiting for a fiscal viability study, 16,000 residents signed to have basically would be a prospective city budget to see if we can become a city. My question is, what advice, and this is primarily for Nora and for the whole panel, but what advice would you have for community residents in East LA who want the responsibility to have community-level and community-based decision-making and see the democratic process of organizing a city council as an infrastructural way to do that, but see examples of fortunate situations such as in Bell and are maybe discouraged by that and not sure if that's the right way for their community, for our community, East LA. So what advice would you have for that?
Any change that's going to happen in the community, anytime you want something done, I believe it starts with community activism, with the activists in the community. Up until today, I didn't consider myself a community organizer. I was more of an activist. But I think it's talking to the people, engaging your residents, forming groups, doing rallies. I mean, we were the people that were in front of City Hall with brooms and shovels trying to uproot the corruption. But again, it takes a lot of, it takes a lot of courage, like I said, and just getting the community engaged. Information is key. If people don't know what they're fighting for, what they're fighting against, I mean, it's like going to war without a loaded gun. You need to make sure that everybody's informed of what the cause is, what your goal is, and how you're going to get there, and just put it into action.
My recommendation would be to be careful what you ask for, because I think that if anything could be learned from this region, and I love this region, that's why I'm invested in working in it, I think small cities brew a lot of inbreeding, for lack of another term, right? Where you have the small contractors that go after big contracts within cities and create an environment that basically, instead of having the police or other special interests, unions or whatever you want to call them, that instead of having those types of players at the table, you have, potential city attorneys at the table, potential developers at the table, and their intentions are not pure, and their intentions are really about money and not necessarily about making equitable access or community-based decision-making. They're about power. And so I think that I would encourage you to really think that through and to really create safeguards to protect the community, because otherwise, it's going to continue to have, I'll just give you an example. I know a local city that the